They tell you the sea is empty out there, that it's all horizon and sky, nothing to hit you but weather. That's a lie you learn quickly on a ship like Mispillion, not because you see the enemy every day, but because you feel how much the Navy is doing to keep you moving, like a heartbeat you can't turn off. Mispillion was a tanker, a big one, deep draft, heavy belly, built to haul liquid cargo like the war could be pumped through steel. Most of her body was cargo tanks, long, quiet spaces you didn't walk through unless you had to. And because she was a tanker, she carried a crew that always felt too small for her size. On paper, you had enough men. In real life, it meant every job landed hard. When things broke, you didn't have spares, people or parts. You had whoever was awake, whoever could lift, whoever could crawl into the heat and fix it. On short workdays, though, if you could even call them that, the ship had pockets of solitude. That's what made her unusual. You could walk down a passageway and not see another face for 10 minutes. You could stand on a catwalk above a cargo tank and hear nothing but the ship's low hum, like the hull was breathing through its teeth. In the military, being alone is rare. On Mispillion, it happened by accident, the way fog happens. My normal workspace was aft, deep down where the ship's bones ran. Propeller shafts came through my space, big, spinning authority you could feel in your soles. Down there the air was warmer and thicker, and everything smelled like a mix of hot metal, paint, fuel, and sweat that had soaked into the ship long before I arrived. The deck plates vibrated with a steady, unbothered confidence. If you closed your eyes, you could tell speed by the tone of it. The ship didn't speak, but it was always talking. We worked hard enough that the Navy gave us one small mercy, a 2-hour noon chow break, 1100 to 1300. On most ships, that's just time to eat and get back at it. On ours, it became sacred. The nooner. 90 minutes of sleep, if you were fast and you didn't get screwed. I guarded that nooner like it was shore leave. Chow call would come, and I'd move like a man with a plan. I had a route that felt like cheating. I'd shoot up a vertical escape trunk, straight up through the ship like an artery, pop out one deck below the chow line, then take real stairs instead of a ladder. That mattered. Stairs meant speed. Stairs meant you weren't waiting behind someone's boots on a rung. I'd hit the line near the front almost every time, 10 guys from the head of it, maybe less if I timed it right. Tray in hand, I'd shovel the food down like it owed me money. Whatever it was, mystery meat, boiled something, coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through a sock. I didn't care. It was fuel. The prize was the rack. Down one ladder to berthing, the air cooler and stale, bodies breathing in rows. I'd drop into my bunk, boots off if I had time, poncho liner pulled over me, and the ship's vibration would carry me under like a current. Here's the thing about 90 minutes. It's the worst kind of sleep. It drops you into the deep end, and when someone yanks you out, you wake up ready to fight God. Every single time the call came, turn to, commence ship's work. I'd come up furious, heart pounding, brain still tangled in dreams, like someone had stolen something from me. So when it happened that day, when my nooner was cut short, my first emotion wasn't fear. It was rage. I was halfway under, warm and gone, when the sound hit the ship like a hammer. Bong! 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 Metal on metal. A hard, urgent clang that didn't belong to routine. Then the speaker. General quarters! General quarters! All hands man your battle stations! And in my foggy, angry head, the only thought was, a drill on my nooner. I threw my legs out of the rack, already cursing whoever decided to play games with my one decent stretch of sleep. When the ship hit me again with that alarm, louder, closer, like it was right outside my skull. Bong! 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 I was still mad when my feet hit the deck. Mad in that stupid, half-asleep way where you'd like to argue with the universe. The berthing compartment was dim, air thick with sweat and canvas and old socks, men rolling out of racks with the same sour look on their faces. Someone bumped a locker, and it clanged like a bell. The ship answered with its own bell. Again, like it was herding us. Bong. 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 General quarters. General quarters. I remember thinking, they're really committed to this drill. That's how far my brain was behind my body. I pulled on my shirt, jammed my arms through it, grabbed my cover, and went into the passageway with the rest of the herd. Up in the corridors, everything felt different. Not louder, just sharper. Hatches were slamming, feet were hitting steel with purpose, and the air smelled of paint and hot machinery, and that faint, sweet edge of fuel that always made me think of a match. A tanker is a big beast, but she's built like a maze. Narrow passageways, ladders that turn you into a crab, doors that bite your shoulders if you don't respect them. At general quarters, the ship becomes a machine in motion, every man a part being clicked into place. You don't think. You follow routes you've walked 100 times, except now you're walking them with your pulse in your throat. I got to my station and sat down like I'd done in practice. That routine was comforting. Hands know what to do even when your head doesn't. I reached for the headset, put it on, the pads cold against my ears, and keyed the circuit to report in. The words were automatic, the Navy's language of boxes checked and systems accounted for. Manned and ready. Other voices answered. Quick, clipped, familiar. Men you didn't always know by name, but you knew by tone. Who talked fast, who talked slow, who always sounded like he had a cigarette in his mouth. For the first minute or two, it was exactly like drill. A little static, a little chatter. Someone misheard something. Someone corrected him. And then the chatter changed. It dropped in volume, like everyone on the circuit leaned closer without meaning to. The words came in fragments at first, like you were hearing a conversation through a wall. Not a drill. I'm telling you. For real. I pressed the headset tighter, like that would make it clearer. My anger was bleeding off now, leaving that hollow place behind it, where your body realizes before your mind does that something is wrong. Then one voice, close and flat, cut through the static like a knife. Hey, this isn't a drill. This is real. You know those moments where your whole system resets? Like a switch flips and the world gets crisp? That happened to me right there, with the headset squeezing my skull and the ship humming through my boots. My mouth went dry. I swallowed, and it felt loud. I could hear my own breathing in the headset for the first time. Real. Real meant there was something out there close enough to justify waking up the whole ship. Real meant the drills weren't theater anymore. They were rehearsal paying off or not. I looked around at the guys in my space. Nobody was joking. Nobody was rolling their eyes. Faces were tight, eyes focused, hands moving in small, practiced motions. There's a particular kind of quiet when men are suddenly serious. You can feel it in the air. I tried to picture what real looked like for a ship like ours. We weren't a destroyer bristling with guns. We weren't a carrier with aircraft on deck. We were a supply ship. Big, slow, deep-bellied. We had armament, sure, but we weren't built to go looking for trouble. Trouble came looking for you. Out on the circuit, someone asked a question I couldn't fully hear. Another voice answered, still low. Astern. That word hit me harder than the alarm bell. Astern meant behind you, following you, watching you. I imagined a dark shape on the water, keeping station like a shadow. I imagined a gun muzzle turning. I imagined the sound of something hitting steel. And the worst part was, we still didn't know what it was. We just knew the ship had decided it was serious enough to put every man where he belonged. The voices kept running, controlled, professional, like they were afraid that panic might be contagious through the wire. I sat there listening, every nerve awake, thinking about how dumb my anger felt now, how petty it had been to curse a drill. When in the back of my mind another thought crept in, slow and cold. If this is real, then we are part of it. And somewhere above my head the ship's bell rang again, as if to agree. Bong! 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 When you're young, you sort the world into neat categories because it makes you feel safe. Combat ship, support ship, front line, rear area, guys who get shot at and guys who don't. Mispillion lived in the category I told myself was safer. A tanker isn't glamorous, but it's valuable in a way even a 19-year-old understands. Fuel is motion. Fuel is helicopters lifting off. Fuel is jets coming back to land. Fuel is a war that keeps breathing. And that's why, out in the Gulf, a tanker feels like a fat deer on open ground. Big, slow, predictable. You don't zigzag like a patrol boat. You don't sprint like a destroyer. You show up where you're supposed to show up, on time, because somebody's counting on what you're carrying. And predictable things are easy to plan for. The other thing you learn fast, sometimes from stories, sometimes from the way men go quiet, is that the enemy loves a second act. They hit you, then they wait. Because when a ship or aircraft goes down, help comes, rescues happen, radios light up, people rush in. And if you're patient, you don't get one target. You get 2 or 3. I'd heard it called the second target game. Shoot the first thing, then take your shot at whoever comes to save it. Sitting there at my station with the headset pressed into my ears, I realized how exposed we were to that kind of thinking. We weren't hunting. We were hauling. Our job was to keep moving, and that made us predictable by nature. Out on the circuit, the talk stayed clipped and controlled. A few words at a time, nothing dramatic. That's how you can tell it's serious. Nobody wastes air. Contacts, astern. Range, unknown. Maintain readiness. The ship's armament got mentioned at some point, not like bravado, more like a man reminding himself he's not naked. We had 4 3-inch guns. On paper, that sounds like something. In your imagination, it sounds like you can stand your ground. But 4 guns doesn't turn a tanker into a warship. 4 guns just means you can answer. You can make noise, you can throw steel. It doesn't mean you can win. That's the part people don't understand about being armed. A rifle doesn't make you invincible. A pistol doesn't make you a cop. A few deck guns don't make you a combatant. They just mean you're not entirely helpless if someone decides to test you, and that's what the word locked onto would mean later, when I learned the fuller story. But in that moment, all I had was uncertainty, and the sense that something out there had taken an interest in us. Time got strange. The clock on the bulkhead moved like it was dragging itself. 45 minutes of general quarters can feel like you're living inside a held breath. Your senses start inventing threats. Every bump becomes a collision. Every change in vibration becomes a hit. Then I felt it. The ship itself changing. Not dramatically, not like the movies. Just a shift. The engine note deepened. The steady hum in the deck plates thickened and took on urgency. The vibration under my boots changed frequency, like the ship was tightening her muscles. It was subtle, but when you've lived inside that sound, you know when it's different. It felt like the whole hull leaned forward. Like Mispillion, This big steel beast had decided she didn't like what was behind her and was going to put distance between them. The circuit stayed calm, but I could hear it in the voices too. Not panic. Focus. Men reading instruments, relaying bearings, checking procedures, doing the thing you do when you're trying not to imagine the worst. Of course I imagined it anyway. A trawler with a gun hidden under a tarp. A torpedo boat cutting in. Mines in the water you never see until you feel them. Boarders climbing up out of nowhere. A flash on the horizon, a thump in the hull. I didn't know. None of us knew. And the not knowing was its own weapon. It made your thoughts run in circles, chewing every possibility until it tasted like metal. Then, after what felt like far longer than 45 minutes, the voice came over the system with a steadiness that almost annoyed me for how normal it sounded. "Secure from general quarters." Just like that. The ship exhaled a fraction. The tension didn't vanish, but it changed shape, like you'd been holding your fists clenched, and now you realized your palms hurt. I pulled the headset off and stood, suddenly desperate to see with my own eyes what we'd been bracing for. I didn't want it filtered through circuits and clipped reports. I wanted the horizon. I started moving up through the ladders and passageways, 2 steps at a time, my heart beating faster now than it had during the alarm. Because if something was out there behind us, I needed to see it. The first thing that hit me when I broke topside was the air. Below decks, everything is warm metal and recycled breath. Up on the weather deck it was wind and salt, and that clean, cold slap that makes you blink like you just woke up for real. The sky was a hard, bright bowl, and the sea looked calm. Too calm, like it didn't know or care that a ship full of men had just snapped to battle stations. For a second I felt stupid, like I'd been spun up over nothing, like the ocean was laughing at us. Then I looked aft. Out behind us, sitting on the glittering line of our wake, was a ship. Not close enough to see faces, not far enough to ignore. A mile or 2 back, maybe. Close enough that you could track it without binoculars if you held your gaze steady. It had that low, squat silhouette that made my brain reach for the nearest label. Trawler. Gunboat. Something with a civilian disguise and a military purpose. It wasn't doing anything dramatic. That was the part that made it worse. It wasn't charging. It wasn't firing. It was just there, hanging off our stern like a question mark. The wake told on it. It was keeping pace, matching our line, not drifting, not wandering. That meant intention. That meant someone on that ship was watching us the way you watch a slow animal you're deciding whether to spook. I leaned on the rail and squinted, trying to pick out details, mast, superstructure, anything that would tell me what it was. Sunlight flashed off something metallic. A lens? A window? My mind started inventing shapes. A gun mount under canvas. Antennas. A man with binoculars. Around me other crewmen had the same posture, trying to look casual while staring too hard. That's a sailor thing. You don't want to be the guy who looks scared. You also don't want to be the guy who looks like he didn't notice the threat behind you. Nobody said much at first. A couple of quiet comments, low enough that the wind could steal them. See it? Yeah. Been there the whole time? Looks like it. I remember how exposed we suddenly felt out there. On a destroyer, you can believe you're the hunter. On a tanker, you're aware of your shape, big and loaded and not built for speed. We had guns, yes, but you could feel the truth of it. We were carrying fuel, not looking for a fight. Our job wasn't to win sea battles. Our job was to not become a headline. Somewhere forward, the engine note dipped and then rose again. Not a roar, but a determined change. The ship's vibration shifted under my boots in a way that made my stomach tighten, like the hull had set its shoulders. We were speeding up. That alone told me something important had happened inside the chain of decisions. The captain didn't speed up for a drill. The captain didn't speed up because a sailor was annoyed his nap got cut short. The captain sped up when someone with more information than me decided we didn't like the geometry of what was happening astern. The ship behind us didn't close the distance, but it didn't fall away either. Not right away. It held, keeping the same stubborn place, like it was daring us to react. I watched our wake stretch longer and whiter, a straight arrow pointing back at it. The more I stared, the more that vessel felt like an eye. Not a ship. An eye. And I remember this odd mix of emotions. Fear, yes, but also something like offense. Like, who the hell are you? Like we were being followed on a road and some stranger was riding our bumper. A sailor near me muttered, half joking, half not. "We're gonna shoot!" Another voice answered instantly, flat as a board. "We're not shooting anybody unless we're told to." That was the Navy in one sentence. Discipline. Procedure. Don't be the guy who starts a war from the deck of a supply ship. So we did what we could do. We held readiness. We kept our posture. We turned our speed up a notch. We made ourselves harder to play with. From the rail, the whole thing looked almost ridiculous. 2 ships on an empty sea, one trailing the other like a stray dog. No cannon fire, no smoke, no explosions, just distance and intent. But my hands were gripping the rail hard enough that my knuckles hurt, and I realized my earlier anger had vanished so completely it felt like it belonged to someone else. Because whatever that ship was, it had reached through the calm surface of the ocean and reminded me of something I'd been trying not to admit since I climbed aboard Mispillion. Support doesn't mean safe. Not out here! Not when you're valuable. I stood there until the vessel finally began to look a little smaller, just a fraction, until it started to lose its grip on our wake. And I didn't know it then, none of us did, but I would find out years later exactly what that trawler really was, and why it had chosen us to follow. In my memory, that day stayed simple for a long time. We were underway. The general alarm blew. Something shadowed us. We went to battle stations. We got lucky. The end. That's how you file it away when you're young, like a story you can tell later with a shrug and a punchline, because anything more complicated would mean admitting how close your life came to changing without you even touching the controls. Then, in 2013, I went to a reunion. If you've never been to one, it's a strange experience. You walk into a room full of men who look older than the ones you remember, but their voices are the same. The laugh is the same. The way they lean in when they're about to tell you something. Same. It's like time did its work on the outside, but couldn't get at the core. We were sitting around tables, bad coffee, name tags, the usual. People trading old sea stories like trading cards. And eventually, like it always does, the talk drifted toward the moments that still had teeth. Someone brought it up the way you bring up a storm you survived. "Hey, remember that time GQ wasn't a drill?" Heads turned. A couple guys grinned. A couple guys got quiet. Because everybody remembers the difference between practice fear and real fear. Your body remembers even if you've convinced your mind it wasn't that big a deal. I laughed and said the line I'd said 100 times. "Yeah, I thought it was a damn drill." Interrupted my nooner. That got the expected chuckles. Then one of the older hands, one of the guys who always seemed to know more than I did back then, shook his head slowly, like he'd been waiting years to correct the record. "That wasn't a North Vietnamese gunboat," he said. I blinked at him. "What was it then?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and said it like he was telling me what the weather had been that day. "Russian spy ship." For a second I just stared. The words didn't fit the picture in my head. Russian spy ship belonged in movies, in Cold War documentaries, in black and white footage with tense music. Not in the middle of my half-asleep anger on a tanker in the Tonkin Gulf. But the more he talked, the more the whole thing snapped into a different frame. Apparently there were Soviet vessels out there, well-known, well-watched, hanging around the Gulf, listening, photographing, recording, playing their own quiet game alongside the war. Not shooting at you the way a gunboat might, but testing you, pacing you, seeing how you reacted, how quickly you went to general quarters, what your procedures looked like, how fast you could run, how disciplined you were, how scared. Harassment without fingerprints, intelligence gathering with a straight face, Cold War shadowboxing while we were just trying to do our jobs and get through the day. And suddenly, the memory of that dark shape astern changed. It wasn't a question mark anymore. It was a statement. "We see you." I sat there at that reunion table and felt something cold move through me. Not fear exactly, but clarity. Because I'd spent a lot of my younger life telling myself I wasn't really in it. Not like the guys on the destroyers, not like the pilots, not like the infantry. Support ship, auxiliary, the business of fuel and cargo, combat adjacent. But that day in the Gulf, the world didn't care what I called myself. That Russian ship hadn't shadowed a destroyer because a destroyer expects to be watched. It shadows something valuable and vulnerable. Something that matters to the machine of war. A tanker loaded with what keeps everything else alive. That's the truth I carried away from the reunion, and it hit me harder than the general alarm ever did. You don't get to opt out of a war just because your job title sounds safer. The sea doesn't care if you're support. The enemy doesn't care. The world doesn't care. Out there, you're either a moving piece on the board or you're not. And we were moving. And it looped back, oddly, to that thing I'd always liked about Mispillion. The solitude. Those empty corridors. Those quiet pockets where you could stand alone and hear the ship breathe. It's a beautiful feeling, being alone on something that big. It makes you think you're hidden in the machinery of it. Like you can disappear for a few minutes and just be a person. But the truth is, you can be alone on a giant ship and still be watched. That's the part that lingers. We ended that reunion conversation the way sailors always end uncomfortable truths, by turning it into a joke you can carry. "Well," someone said, raising his coffee cup like it was a toast, "we did our duty." "Yeah," I added, and everyone laughed because it was funny, and because it was true. We sped up a notch, and ran away bravely. But when I'm alone sometimes, when it's quiet and I'm half asleep, I can still hear it. Not in my ears, in my chest. That metal bell calling you out of a dream and into reality. Bong, bong, bong. And I think maybe bravery isn't always charging toward the threat. Maybe sometimes it's keeping your head, doing procedure, and living long enough to sit at a reunion table decades later, and finally learn what was really behind you.